I've had the opportunity to work with Pastor Scott for almost 11 years now, and he and I have really been partners in ministry. And when you kind of go through the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads, you see what a person's made of. And over the years, Scott is a man of conviction. He is a man who prays. He is a man who reads his Bible, and he is a dedicated family man, always striving to be the best dad, the best husband he can. But I also know that he loves this church, he loves you guys, and wants nothing more than for us to all be great disciples of Jesus and live that out here at this church and out in our communities. And so thank you, Pastor Scott. Thank you, Scott, for being our pastor. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for the blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifice you make. So let's give him a round of applause. And because you don't need to hear the same sermon twice, you're dismissed. So go home, enjoy your family, enjoy your afternoon. Go work on your kitchen, I'm sure. So he's doing a kitchen remodel right now. You see, now Scott hates this. Honestly, he hates like the public accolades. He'll get up here every Sunday and talk to us and bring us the word of the Lord, but he doesn't like that public appreciation too much. But what I do know about Scott is that this morning his encouragement level went up. His encouragement level went up because somebody noticed, somebody appreciated, somebody said, "Thank you for what you do." So as much as this might have been painful for him to hear, he walks out of here today feeling better about the work that he's doing because of our kids and Melissa and the words that we say. And our words have a ton of power in people's lives. We've all experienced those people who are just encouragers. They just come alongside you, and when you're around them, you feel good about yourself, about what you're doing. They draw things out of you that you didn't know that were there. Of course, there's the people on the other side of that too, right? Those people who you spend time with, and when you're done, you feel worse about yourself because of the words they spoke into your life. When I was a kid, my family used to go up to Canocti Harbor Inn up at Clear Lake. Does anybody remember Canocti? Go up there a couple times. Come to find out, they're closed now. So if you didn't go, sorry about that. But back when we would go, it was a great place. It had swimming pools and miniature golf course. Of course, it's on Clear Lake, so if you had a boat, you got to go out and go water skiing and do all of that. And I remember being there when I was probably a 7 or 8 year old. And back then, late 70s, early 80s, they actually still had diving boards at public pools. And there at Canocti, they had a high dive. And I'm a pretty comfortable swimmer. I was on the swim team. My parents had a pool in the backyard when we were growing up. So I pretty much grew up in the water and wanted to go up on the high dive. So I asked Mom and Dad, "Can I go up on the high dive?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, go for it. Go on up." So when you look up at a high dive, it's scary. I mean, you look up and it looks very high. But okay, let's go do this thing. So you walk up, and you go to the ladder. And the ladder's scary because you kind of got these little metal rungs and your feet are already wet because you've been in the pool. And so you get up to the top, and then when you get to the top, it's way scarier than it was at the bottom. As you look down, you're like, oh my goodness. But there's already people coming up the ladder, so there's no turning around. So my mom and dad are on the pool deck, and they're encouraging me, "Hey, go on, you can do it, just jump off." So scoot myself up to the front and look down and jump off. And I do the biggest belly flop you can even imagine. I mean, it was just straight on down, boom, belly flop. Hurt so bad. I like to think that I came out like all strong and stuff, but I'm sure I was crying. And I go over to Mom and Dad, and they're consoling me. And so a few minutes later, they say, you maybe you should go try it again. Go jump off. Go jump off. Now, I don't know about you guys, but there's things that people have told me in my life that I heard the words when I was young, but it took 5, 10, maybe even 15 years to actually, for the light bulb to go on and like, oh, that's what they meant when they said that. When I got into a pool as a kid and somebody said jump in, I dove in. I mean, you're on the side of the pool and you go in, you just go head first. You're at swim practice and they say jump in, you dive in. So Mom and Dad are telling me to jump in. I'm not thinking feet first, I'm thinking head first. So they say, go on up and do this again. All right, I'll go up. So same deal, get there, afraid going up, look down, still really high. Get to the edge, jump off, boom, belly flop number 2. back to back. I can tell you the second belly flop does in fact hurt worse than the first belly flop. I mean, big old red belly. And at that point, I think my parents encouraged me not to go back up on the high dive. That's enough. You're not going to be Greg Louganis. You do not have a career as a high diver at all. But what I learned from that, what their encouragement did, was it starts to put in you that idea that, you know what, you have to face your fears. That as you go through life, there are things that are scary, that are fearful, that you want to run away from, you want to shrink back from, that if I just hide, maybe it'll go away. And the reality is that's not how life goes. When tough times come, we need to step into them. We need to face our fears. I like jumping off of high rocks now, partly because I get to overcome my fear of heights, and I jump in with 2 feet going down. I do not dive in, all right? But my parents encouraged me to try and to overcome my fears, and that has been a great lesson in life. When you think back on your life, who's been an encouragement to you? Who are those people who've come around you and seen something in you, who've noticed something about you, who've encouraged you to do something that maybe you wouldn't do otherwise? Who are those people in your life? Now today we're talking about extending grace through encouragement. And so you can think about the people who've encouraged you, but I want you to think about the things that they did so that you can go ahead and be encouragers yourself. I want us today to be thinking about who are the people in our lives that our words, that our actions can encourage to become who God created them to be, who can become more than they are today, people who maybe you can give an opportunity to. You can tell them you believe in them. Maybe you have friends who are having a hard time right now. Their life isn't going well, and you can encourage them in their troubles and their trials. And so be mindful today of who in my life can I encourage. Why don't you guys go ahead and open your Bibles. We're going to go to the book of Ephesians. We're going to go to the book of Ephesians. We're just going to talk about what our words are. 2 types of words we can use. So Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians 4:29. And I'll read this for you here. It also happens to be in your bulletin, so if you want to look on your sermon notes there, you can see that. But it goes like this, Ephesians 4:29, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." It says, let no corrupting word, or if you have the NIV, it says unwholesome talk, corrupting words, unwholesome words come out of your mouth, but rather good words, words that are good for building up, putting grace in people's lives. Now, if you were to look into the Greek and you see these contrasting words of corrupting or unwholesome versus this building up and grace words, the corrupt word in Greek, when it refers to fruit, would be translated rotting, like rotting fruit. That kind of nasty, gross, browning, getting to be slimy, maybe has flies on it, maybe has maggots growing in it. That just fruit that you don't want to put in your mouth. That fruit that does not enhance anything. That nastiness. Where there's those types of words that when we speak them into people's lives, they're rotting. They rot people's souls. They're rotting words. When this word is used for building materials, it means that it's unuseful. It's useless type building material. So if the board is too short for the space, it's no good for building a house. So Paul says, don't use those unuseful, those useless and rotting type words, but rather use words that give grace, rather that build up. If you think about fruit, when we take a bite into a peach or a strawberry or a grape or an apple that's just perfectly ripe, it enhances our life. It gives us that sweetness, that tartness, that brings kind of that life to us. Paul says, use those types of words. Use the life-giving type of words. Your fill-ins here are rotten words, discourage. And I kind of created this word, but they encourage people. Rotten words encourage people. If there's words that can put courage into you, rotten words take it away. They are anti-courage. They are encouraging. Versus grace words, which encourage or give courage. So rotten words encourage, grace words give courage. And so today, think about your words. What are your words doing in people's souls? Are they rotting words, or are they building up words? Are they enhancing words? And so those are the two types of words that we can use when we speak into people's lives. Now I want to take a look at a character today, a character in the New Testament. His name's Joseph. He's a Levite. He's from Cyprus. My guess is none of you know him by that name. You don't know him by Joseph. This is not Jesus' dad. This is not the guy from the Old Testament. This is a guy whose nickname became his used name, and his nickname means son of encouragement, and it's Barnabas. Barnabas was such an encouraging person that he was given the name Mr. Encouragement. When he walked into a room, hey, Mr. Encouragement's here. Hey, how's it going? It's good to see you today. He brought life into the room. He was such an encourager that you and I here today still feel the reverberations of his encouragement. How many of you are Gentiles? That is, you did not grow up in a Jewish tradition. Most of us, I'm going to imagine, are Gentiles. Without Barnabas, there's a likelihood that there's not that many of us here today because of the work that he did with Paul and with Gentiles. You see, our access to the Bible is being affected even now by Barnabas. Because also, without Barnabas, there's probably not a Paul. And without Paul, about 2/3 of our New Testament, we don't have. Without the encouragement of Barnabas, much of the New Testament that we have today, we might not have. Also, the second gospel, the Gospel of Mark, without Barnabas, there's a real good likelihood that we don't have a Gospel of Mark. And we're going to see why this encourager, or what this encourager did that brought life into people's lives. And so we're going to want to look at the characteristics today. What is it about Barnabas? Why was he Mr. Encouragement that we can draw on today? So let's go ahead and turn your Bibles to Acts. We're going to be in Acts today. We're going to look at the characteristics of Barnabas. What was encouraging about Barnabas? So Acts chapter 4, I'll give you a little backstory here. Just right before this is written, there's a story Luke is writing about what's going on in the church. He said everything's going well in the church. Everybody got along. Everybody was generous with one another. So nobody was having any issues. There were no needs. And sometimes somebody would sell a house or sell some property, and they would give the proceeds to the church, or they'd bring it to the apostles' feet. And the prime example they have for how this worked was Barnabas. So read this with me here. It's Acts chapter 4, verse 36 and 37. It says, Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. He sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So our prime example of Mr. Encouragement, the first time we hear about him in the New Testament, he is giving proceeds from the sale of a field to the church. So, what do we see? We see that encouragers are giving. Encouragers give. The characteristic that we see in this couple of verses is that encouragers give. Now, we've been talking about generosity here for the last couple of months, and obviously from this context, there's a certain amount of generosity of giving that has to do with our possessions, with our money, with our things. When we give our things away, when we are generous with people, it's encouraging to them. It brings encouragement into their life. I knew a single mom. She had a couple of kids, and a friend of hers brought over 3 or 4 bags of groceries one day, just kind of out of the blue. And she said, hey, I was at the grocery store, and it was a 2-for-1 day, and I don't need the second. I don't need the 2. I just need the 1. And I thought, hey, maybe you could use all the 2s. So she brings over several bags of groceries. But what she didn't know is that single mom pretty much didn't have any food in the house and wasn't getting paid for another couple of days. And so this generous giving person shows up, brings 3-4 bags of groceries to the single mom, and the hope and the encouragement in that single mom's life goes up. It goes up because of somebody's generosity, because somebody was giving. This generosity, this giving, it goes beyond money and things, though. Of course, it goes to our time. Are we generous with our time with people? Are we together with people when they're hurting? Are we generous with our calendar? You see, one of the attributes that we see in an encouraging person is they are a giving person. But if we look beyond that, you see, generosity, I think, is an outward sign of something that's going on inside. And what we see on the inside would be a selfless person. We see a person who's not out for their own good. They're not out for their own benefit. They're not out to get themselves ahead. In fact, they might even say, I see an attribute in you that I do, but I think you could be better at it than me, and I want you to do that. And so, for an encouraging person to be giving, you have to be selfless. You have to be looking around at where can I encourage people? Where are their needs? How can I give my stuff away? It's not about acquiring more things, more accolades for yourself. It's about taking what's God's given you and giving it to others. So when we see an encouraging person, you're going to see a giving person. All right, let's keep going. Let's take a look at another characteristic. Flip over a few pages to Acts chapter 9. So first we see that encouragers are giving. The second thing we see is that encouragers forgive others and give people a second chance. This is Acts chapter 9. I'll give you a little backstory here. So we have this guy. His name is Saul. Saul's a bad guy, okay? Saul persecuted the church. In fact, the first Christian martyr, Saul was there approving of the killing of this Christian. He went around arresting people, closing churches, killing Christians. That's what this guy Saul did. Well, in the middle of his journey, he meets Jesus, or I should say Jesus meets him. His life is totally transformed. He spends 14 years in Arabia. He's now coming back, and God has put an anointing on his life to do ministry. Well, Saul, he's not quite Paul yet, Saul goes to Jerusalem. When he gets to Jerusalem, the apostles say, I don't know about this Saul guy. What I do know about him is that he used to kill us. He used to persecute us. He's not a good guy. At least that's not our experience with him. And I'm not going to be the guy who's going to let him come into the church on my watch. I don't know if he's a Christian or not, but we're not giving him a chance. And really, who can blame the apostles? That seems like a fairly safe stance. But Barnabas saw it a little bit different. And so let's see what he did. Acts 9, 26 to 28. It goes like this. It says, when he, that's Saul, came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. But Barnabas took him, brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. So what characteristic do we see in Barnabas here? We see somebody who forgives and gives people a second chance. Barnabas had every right to not forgive Saul. Saul had killed, or at least approved of the killing of people he knew, people he loved, people he cared about. He had every right to hold that against Saul, but he said, no, I see something more here. This guy, Saul, he needs to be forgiven, and he needs to be given a second chance. He needs to be given a second chance. How freeing is it when we mess up, and somebody comes to us and goes, yeah, you messed up. You shouldn't have done that, but you're better than that. You're bigger than that. There's something more that God's doing in your life. You have abilities, and I'm not going to let one mistake get in the way of what God has planned for you. And so they say, you are forgiven. Let's try it again. If you're forgiven, give you a second chance. That person, when we're given a second chance, we stand tall and say, I can do it, and I want to make you proud, and I want to do what I can do. And we feel encouraged. We have courage to continue on and not make the same mistakes like we made before. My grandfather was a pastor here for almost 40 years back, starting in the 40s. He retired in 1979. And one of the cool things about being on staff right now is that there's people from when my grandfather was pastoring who come and tell me stories. Last night I was at an event. Somebody came up to me, and my grandpa and your grandpa used to hang out and telling me all kinds of stuff. And it's just fun. You get to hear stories about the impact that your family had on people's lives. Well, there's a story that was told to me a few years ago, and it's stuck with me. We had a staff member. This is probably back in the 50s. We had a staff member And he wasn't real happy what was going on at the church. And so he writes a letter describing an article, describing all the things he was not happy about the way ministry was going, and he sends it off to Christianity Today. And Christianity Today picks up the article and then publishes it. And so now one of our employees' gripes with the church is spread out all across the nation. So anybody who picks up Christianity Today could see all the things this person didn't like about what that Baptist church out in San Jose was doing. Now, if you're on that leadership team, you're on that board of elders, board of deacons, you're not happy. One of our own is writing negative reports, getting it published, and creating disunity, creating trouble, creating strife. We got to just fire him. He shouldn't be here. We don't need this kind of person on staff. And that's not the type of atmosphere, employee, person we want doing ministry here. So he's got to go. Well, the way I understand it, my grandfather, went to the board meeting where they were going to discuss what to do with this guy. And he said, you know what? He absolutely blew it. Shouldn't write that article. He shouldn't be getting it published in Christianity Today. He shouldn't spread this dirty laundry all over our country about our church. That's not right. That is not okay. But this person has potential. God has a calling on this man's life. And we're not going to fire him. And we need to encourage him in the gifts that God has given him. Now, I don't know what would have happened if my grandfather had agreed and said, hey, let's just fire this guy. I don't know what he would have ended up doing. I don't know where he would have gone. But what I do know is that he ended up doing decades of great ministry all over the world. He became a publisher, published magazines that have made a difference in the kingdom of God. So one man saw a person with potential and then said, you messed up. Barnabas saw Paul and said, hey, yeah, it was a rough go you had there persecuting the church. We don't know what would have happened if Barnabas had not vouched for Paul in Jerusalem in front of the apostles. But what we do know is that Paul's ministry, that this person who was on our staff's ministry became amazing in the kingdom to the point where about 2/3 of our New Testament was written by Paul, where you and I are here today because Barnabas forgave Paul and allowed him to use that gift of preaching and go into cities. And so, what do we find about encouragers? Encouragers forgive people. Encouragers give people a second chance. Who in your life needs a second chance right now? Who in your life is screwed up, messed up, but you go, I see something in there. They need to receive that forgiveness so that they can be freed to move on and be great, to be amazing, to be that person that God created them to be, because that's what encouragers do. All right, let's keep moving. We're going to go over to Acts chapter 15. So flip with me there, going to Acts chapter 15. We've got another story. It's going to go along with this forgiveness, second chance thing too. But I'll give you a little backstory. See, Paul and Barnabas, they ended up doing ministry together. They went into, throughout the Roman Empire, preaching. They got into trouble together. They did miracles together. They preached in cities together. They were escaped from cities together. Paul and Barnabas did ministry together. In fact, what you find is right after where we had just been reading, the ministry was all Barnabas and Paul. And then there was a point at which it was apparent that Paul's preaching ministry was greater than Barnabas's, because Barnabas was probably the older statesman. He'd been doing it longer. But Paul got better at it than Barnabas, and then it got switched to Paul and Barnabas. Just a side note, encouragers don't mind if somebody else gets better than them, okay? We're not going to dig into that one. But what we find here is these two ministry partners, they have an issue. They have a struggle. They have a fight. And let's read about that. Acts chapter 15, verses 36 to 40. Let's see what Barnabas does here. It says, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let's go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with him, but Paul did not think it was wise because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commanded by the believers to the grace of the Lord. So what do we see about Barnabas? We got two guys, did ministry together for years, did great things together, and they get to this point where Paul, rightly so, says, hey, that dude abandoned us. We were in the middle of it. If we have somebody on the team, they are either with us or not with us, and he was a deserter. We can't have a deserter. I don't trust him. I'm not doing ministry with him. Barnabas says, you know what? If John Mark stays here in Antioch, he's going to get caught up in other stuff. He needs to do ministry. He needs to be given a second chance. He needs to go along. And so what we see is that Barnabas stood up for John Mark. It's a mark of an encourager. An encourager stands up for others. An encourager stands up for others. We see, of course, the forgiveness. We see the second chance. But Barnabas knew what was right and said to his friend, you can come with me or not, but John Mark's coming along, and we're going to go do ministry together. You see, encouragers stand up for others. And I don't know if you've ever had somebody stand up for you, but man, does it feel good when you see somebody go, oh man, they really do believe in me so much that they broke up that whole ministry thing that they were doing together. That whole relationship they had took a split there because this person is standing up for me. Now, again, we don't know what would have happened to John Mark if Barnabas had not stood up for him, but we do know two things that happened. First is, somewhere along the line, John Mark got hooked up with Peter. Peter started telling stories about Jesus and what Jesus did, and Mark said, hey, maybe somebody ought to write this down. So Mark wrote down the stories of Peter, which gives us the second gospel we have, the book of Mark. This John Mark dude, if he had stayed in Antioch not doing ministry, maybe wouldn't get hooked up with Peter, maybe wouldn't have heard the stories, maybe wouldn't have written down what we do believe is the first gospel that was written. The first set of stories about Jesus were written by this guy. Who knows what would have happened if Barnabas had not stood up for John Mark? We could be sitting with 3 gospels instead of 4 today. Another piece, and I think this is pretty cool too. You don't have to turn there, but in 2 Timothy 4:11, Paul is writing this. So Paul's writing, and he says, only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in my ministry. You see, the encouragement of Barnabas moved to a place where John Mark was restored to the place where he's now an encouragement to Paul. Without Barnabas taking John Mark with him, we might not have had Paul getting the encouragement that he ended up needing. And it's this circle, this cycle of encouragement that got filled. And so we see that encouragers stand up for others. Another thing that we see kind of in this here is that we see that Barnabas and John Mark went together. So your next fill-in is Barnabas and John Mark went together because we also find that encouragers are present. Encouragers are present. If you have a friend, if you have a family member, you have a loved one who finds themselves in trouble, there's been a death, there's been a sickness, there's been a crisis in their life, when you show up, you don't have to say a whole bunch of words, but when you show up, they're not alone. And they gain encouragement because they're together. You're there. I'm not alone in this. I know if I have a hard thing that I have to go through and somebody comes up next to me and goes, okay, we're doing this together. Like, really? You'll go through this with me? Yeah, sure, let's do it. All right, still going to be hard, but I got somebody with me now. I'm not alone in this. And all of a sudden, the encouragement level goes up because it's not just us anymore. It's not just me anymore. It's us, and we can do this. My daughter hates getting shots. I mean, I don't know anybody who likes getting shots. Okay, let's be real with that. But she's at the point where she pushes nurses' arms away. Like, no, you're not giving me a shot yet. And I can't imagine what it would be like if I were not in the room when she was getting a shot. Because when I am in there, I have to encourage her. Sometimes with, you can do it. This is going to be fine. It won't hurt for that long. Sometimes with encouragement of bribery. Slurpees. We'll go get a Slurpee afterwards. You'll get something tonight, ice cream tonight. Sometimes it's the encouragement of, you just got to buck up and take it, okay? If you had just had your shot already, this would be over and we'd be out and be done. So I can't imagine my daughter in there alone getting a shot. So just that presence of being with her helps her out. This week, my wife had the blessing of being in a delivery room where her nephew's wife was having their first baby. And Penny's sister couldn't be there because she had prior obligations, and of course, babies don't always give you a great date for when they're going to show up. And so when Penny arrived at 7:30 in the morning in Sacramento on Tuesday, her nephew Stephen's encouragement, hope went up. He gave her a big hug, a big smile on his face. Oh, Auntie Penny's here. Okay, everything's going to be all right. We're going to be fine now. And his encouragement, his wife's encouragement went up, not because my wife's a nurse, but because she was present. She was there. And you see, encouraging people, they're present. They're together. Another attribute, another aspect of this togetherness is that sometimes our strength can come alongside the weakness of somebody else. And our grace, our encouragement, a place of strength for us, can encourage somebody else's weakness. Let me explain it this way. If you have a friend who maybe they have trouble eating healthily, they don't eat healthy food, you call them up one day, you say, I'm going to encourage you to start eating better. So you call them up, you say, I'm going to call you every day and ask you what you ate. And you call them up, how'd you do today? Well, I had McDonald's and I had Taco Bell and then I had tempura for dinner. It was a great day. I really enjoyed all my food I ate. Like, hey, did you have any fruit? No fruit. Did you have any veggies today? No. Well, you need to eat some fruit. So then when the next day you call, how'd you do? Well, I had some fruit. I had an apple pie at McDonald's today, so I totally got fruit in. You're like, okay, this isn't working. And you call every day and say, you can do better tomorrow. Hey, you can do better tomorrow. You'll be better. And every day it's the same answer. If you have a strength of being able to eat healthy, then the answer is, you know what? Okay, apparently this encouragement I'm giving you isn't working, so I'm coming to your house and we're going to go grocery shopping. I'm going to buy you some healthy food. We're going to go to your house. We're going to take out all the junk food, and I'm going to teach you how to cook healthy food for yourself. And so your friend, now they don't deserve it. They haven't earned that right for you to come alongside them. But you say, you know what? My strength is healthy eating. My strength is exercising at 5 in the morning, so I'm going to be knocking at your door at 5 in the morning. My strength is budgeting, and so I'm going to help create a budget for you, and we're going to talk through how this works. You take your strength and you come alongside a friend's weakness, and not just in making phone calls, but showing up, giving your time for this person. You have a friend who has an addiction problem. You ask them, what's your biggest time of struggle? When do you struggle the most? Well, on my way home, I always want to stop at the liquor store. I always want to stop by. Well, you know what? We're carpooling now. We're not stopping at the liquor store anymore. I'm calling you and we're talking on the phone the whole way to your house. It's inconvenient for you, but your strength starts to help their weakness so that they can get through their tough time. You see, grace is way more than just saying, I forgive you. It's, I forgive you. How can I come alongside you? And so what we see in Barnabas is that we have this person who is generous. We have this person who's forgiving. We have this person who gives a second chance. We have this person who stands up for others, and we see somebody who's together, who's with them. So those are some of the characteristics. There's others. I haven't exhausted this search, but these are some of the characteristics we see of a generous person. So what I'd like to do right now is I want us all to practice this. Now, I asked in the message team meeting, maybe we can just turn to the person next to you and say something nice to them. We're not going to do that. Don't worry about it, okay? What I'm going to have you do is all by yourself, pray. I want you to pray for somebody. Who in your life needs encouragement? Who's having a hard time? Who do you see abilities and strengths in that your words can encourage them to pursue? So I want you to stop. We're just going to do this for a few seconds. Pray by yourself, right where you are, for somebody in your life who needs encouragement. So let's just do that, and I'll close this up in a second here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Now, I want you all to grab your phones and turn your ringer on. All right, I know that's unusual. It's church. I get it, okay? Don't go checking your fantasy score right now. All right, promo's out. People are getting hurt already. Your week might be over, so don't worry about it. Pull out your phone, turn on the ringer, and I want you to text that person you just prayed for. Text that person and tell them, I just prayed for you. I prayed encouragement. I prayed hope. I prayed, whatever you prayed for them, but just text them, if you can, and tell them you prayed for them. And the reason I want your ringers on is I'd love for us all to hear maybe some of the responses. You don't have to read the response. I just want to hear that we start getting texts back. Because that's the funny thing about encouragement is when we start giving it away, people receive it and go, man, that was a perfect time. I needed to hear that. I appreciate you. You really think I can do that? Thanks, I really needed that now. And so I'd love us all to hear maybe what are the responses, again, just the sound of the text, that we start that chorus of response to our encouragements. So let's get practical here. We've talked about characteristics. We kind of talked about high level. How does encouragement work itself out? But in real life, how do we do this? In real life, how do we encourage people? Here's just a few ideas. There's thousands, I'm sure. I've given you blanks there in your sermon notes. Feel free to write in more than what I tell you. But one of the ways might be to write somebody a note. Write a note of encouragement. You can go to Target, you can get a box about this big, cardstock with envelopes, pretty colors and everything, and write a little note on there. I don't know about you guys, but my mail at home is pretty much 100% bills, political advertisement right now, and somebody wanting me to get their credit card or, something else. I don't almost ever get any personal email, and I'm not saying that to ask you guys to send me letters. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be nice in your own mailbox to get some things besides somebody wanting your money or somebody wanting to give you credit? So write a note. Now, if you write a note for a coworker, sometimes it's creepy if you know your coworker's address, all right? So just put it on their desk, all right? Put it in, give it to them some other less creepy way, all right? But write notes of encouragement. There's actually a book out right now about a guy who writes notes of encouragement on napkins, and apparently has given one to his daughter like every day she's gone to school her entire life, all right? So that's just his thing in life, is to write notes of encouragement on napkins. So write notes of encouragement. Write texts of encouragement. Hey, I was thinking about you today. Hey, thank you for doing what you do. I really appreciate. Start using those words when you text somebody. My wife is great at this. And by the way, thank you, David, for that text of encouragement right there. I appreciate that. It comes up on my iPad now. So, right in the middle of a sermon, a little bit of encouragement. So thank you. I appreciate that. Life's been crazy for the past 6 or 8 weeks. And in our home, what that means is I've been gone a few weekends, been to a conference, had a few evening meetings, and our marriage relationship gets, kind of the grace starts to wane a little bit as we're not together. We become more like roommates than spouses. And so I said, well, with my wife giving me these little hints of, we haven't gone away in a while. It takes me a while to pick up on them, but finally, I get it. So went to the calendar, found a free weekend, called my mom, texted my mom and said, hey, can Annika come over and hang out with you? So we got it all set up. It's in 2 weekends from now, so I will not be here on the 16th. I'm just telling you right now. I'll be with my wife. We're not sure where. We're just kind of going to see where we can find a hotel on Friday, so it's just kind of be a little bit of roulette. We'll see what we get. And so I did that. Now, when I do that for my wife, it creates encouragement in her life, because now she goes, whew, in 2 weeks, I know we're going to get away. We don't have to worry about all of the stuff in life. We're just the two of us for 2 nights. It'll be great. So I've created some encouragement in my wife's life. Now, last week, when I'm preparing this sermon, she actually texts me and goes, thank you so much for setting up the weekend. Thank you so much for finding a place for Annika to go for the weekend. I really appreciate it. Now, I didn't set up the weekend to get appreciation from my wife. On the other hand, when I get appreciation from my wife, it starts to create this environment of encouragement, this environment of appreciation. You get this flywheel of encouragement going where I do something and it helps encourages her, and we start to get it back. And we don't do it to get encouragement, but that's the atmosphere we start to create in our homes, in our workplaces. How can you guys create that in your home? How can you create that environment of encouragement in your home? This week, I've been having my daughter come to my, she goes to school here, so come straight to my office after school because there's a lot more homework in 4th grade than there was in 2nd and 3rd grade. And so rather than fighting that battle at 5:30 when we get home, we start a little earlier in the afternoon at about 3:30. And so I was in a meeting not in my office on Wednesday, and my hope, I didn't tell Annika this, my hope was that I would come back from my meeting, she'd be sitting at my desk, and she'd be doing homework. But I was prepared for anything. So I walk in, and there she is. She's already gone down into the office down here and got her pastries. And they're now on my desk, and she's doing her homework. I'm like, oh, wow, this is good. So I don't want to encourage her too much because sometimes that'll get her some more sidetracked. So I just say, hey, thank you. You're doing your homework. Keep going. But that night, when Penny and I are together and Annika's there, in front of Annika, I said to Penny, my wife, I said, man, I got back from a meeting today and Annika was already doing her homework. I was so proud that I didn't know what she'd be doing. I was proud that she took the initiative on her own to do homework. And of course, now that gives my wife a chance to encourage Annika, and you should see the smile on Annika's face. Because, oh, he noticed. Oh, that's great. And you start to create this environment of encouragement. Now, I'm not saying I get it right all the times. I've given you maybe the 2 examples in the past month where I did. But the point is in our homes, what are we doing to encourage that environment of encouragement? When we brag on one another in front of other people, that brings encouragement. Pastor Scott might have been a little uncomfortable this morning, but let me tell you, he's encouraged because of it. Spouses, brag on your spouse, your husband, your wife. Dads, moms, brag on your kids in front of other people. Brag on your coworkers in front of the boss. Oh my goodness, you should have seen what this guy did yesterday. What she did yesterday went way above and beyond. And at home, in marriages, in workplaces, it starts to grow us up as to be, wow, somebody noticed what I did. Wow, I'll do that again because I got encouragement. And it starts to create an environment of encouragement. I think a huge one, look for areas that need a nudge in people's lives. Practice it. You'll get better at it. Give somebody an opportunity. Give somebody a chance. Maybe you're a senior something at your office, a salesperson, or you're in construction and you're kind of the one who always leads the way. Maybe there's somebody junior than you who's been there for a long time and you go, you know what? You're running the next sales call. You know what? You're building this next wall. And it's not to pawn your work off, but to encourage somebody to say, you know what? I think you can do this, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be better than me. And if you get better than me, that is awesome. Remember the first time that Pastor Dennis gave me a chance to preach here at this church. About 5 days out, he's like, okay, I'm going to be gone on Sunday. You got the whole book of Job. Go for it. Like, wow, okay, I've never preached, at least not in the U.S. I've never read a book on preaching. I don't know anything about preaching, but Pastor Dennis is like, pretty much like, he can't mess it up that bad. It's only 1 week, so go for it, kid. And you start, and somebody gave a chance, and somebody said, wow, maybe he can preach. Maybe the first time he asked me to do ministry here at this church, he's like, wow, you think I can do that? You think I'm capable of that? Yeah. Thank you. And you start to live into it. And, 15 years later, you're actually doing it. So who in your life can you encourage to become something more than they are now? Don't look at their age. Don't look at their education. Look at their abilities. Look at what God has put in them. Look at the stuff that they have and go, I think you can do that. I think you can do that. And encourage other people. And you know what? If they displace you, God will take care of it. God will take care of it. So, encouragers we have found today, they're giving people. As we extend grace to people, we become giving people. As we extend grace, we extend forgiveness. We extend second chances. We extend being together with people. Those are the kinds of things that we see in generous people. Now, in encouraging people. This week has been a great week for Bay Area sports fans. Giants won the 3rd World Series. Good days. Anybody go to the parade? Wow. I've met a few who have. They said it was awesome. Other than the rain, it was a great time. But, man, Game 7 on Wednesday, pacing in the living room when the guy gets on third base, like, oh, you didn't do this to me now. This can't. My daughter's like, what are you doing? Don't worry, it's okay. I'm just going to watch the TV from back here. And just nerve-wracking. And, of course, Pablo catches the ball. And then you try to soak in every moment going on afterwards, all the post-game interviews and switching channels. And I was watching Comcast Sportsnet, and Amy Gutierrez comes on, and she is interviewing Ryan Vogelsong. And she asks a question of Ryan, and as he starts to tell us the answer, I said, this is it. This is it. Because you see, Ryan Vogelsong, he was washed up. He was a pitcher for the Giants, didn't make it, went to the Pirates, didn't make it. He was in Japan, pitching in Japan for 2 years. He was no good. He was done. His career that once was very promising was now over. And the Giants said, hey, come on over, play in spring training, let's see how you do. And when he entered this environment of encouragement, his career took off. He ends up pitching in several World Series. He ends up being an all-star pitcher, and for a time was one of the more dominant pitchers in the league. Why? Because he entered an environment of encouragement. So we're going to play a video of Ryan Vogelsong soaked with beer, has his goggles on. It's perfect for church. So go ahead and play that.
I know you need to go. I want to ask you about Bruce Bochy. What has Bruce Bochy meant to you in your career?
You know, he has, the thing that I never had anywhere else was a manager that had confidence in me. And even though I didn't throw the ball the way I wanted to at times this year, he never wavered. And he kept telling me, Bogey, I believe in you, I believe in you. And Rags too. And that's not something you get everywhere. And I hope these young guys that are here don't take it for granted. Because I've been places where the manager didn't believe in you. And when the guys above you, the manager, the pitching coach believe in you, it makes you want to play better. And it makes you want to do things like this for them. And I mean, I know all of us in here wanted to win this thing for Huddy, but the big guy, he trusts all of us. And if he doesn't trust you, you're not here. That's the bottom line. So he came in here tonight and told us all before the game, I believe in every single one of you, and it showed up tonight.
You see, manager, the pitching coach, they created an environment of encouragement. An environment where if you're here, we believe in you. And if we believe in you, we know you can go out and do it. And what it created in Ryan Vogelsong, what it created in the Giants, what it creates in all of us are all-stars, are people who go above and beyond, are people who go out and get it done. And so I want to ask you the question, who in your life can you encourage to become everything God created them to be? If you're in a place of management, a place of power, a place of authority, your words, when they speak into your kids, when they speak into your employees, it makes a difference. When you use words of life, when you use words of grace and hope, it builds people up, and words of rot tear down. You know, the things that you say, the things that you do make a difference. Create in your homes, in your workplaces, places of encouragement where you end up being all-stars, where you end up having employees, where you end up having family members, where you have spouses who are so encouraged that they just go out and they do what God created them to be. So, guys, as we extend grace, let's be great extenders of encouragement to those around us.